Welcome parents to Hamilton High School's Parent Presentation Series. We started these parent presentations about 4 years ago because we saw there was a need to provide some support services to parents in our community and within our school. These parent presentations provide a wide range of topics. We have expert speakers that talk about social media, communication, mental health issues, all the areas that teens are going through, and to educate parents on what they can do, resources they can obtain, and just support services. We also have a student educational series at the same time in the evening, so you can bring your child with you and they will go to a separate classroom and they will get education on the same topic. Most teachers give extra credit, but your child will always get 2 volunteer hours for every session they attend. And at Hamilton, we also have support groups that the social workers run. We have support groups for anxiety, depression, and self-harm. We have groups for grief, substance abuse, anger management, and we also provide one-on-one support to students, as well as meet with parents if there's issues you might be struggling with and need some professional guidance. You can come and meet with us. And so at Hamilton, we provide a great deal of services. Please contact us if you need any additional support, or we can sit down and talk about ways that we can help you and your child be successful during these high school years. Thank you so much for coming to our presentations, and these presentations, as you can see, are videotaped and will be available 2 weeks after every presentation, along with the PowerPoint and any other materials. We will have them on our website. So thank you and have a great day.
Okay, well, good evening, everyone. I am Nikki Kuntz. I am the clinical director for Teen Lifeline. I'm very happy to be here tonight. The one thing I'll tell you is that I am used to working with teenagers all day, every day. And so what that means is if you have a question, ask it right away. Okay, I'm used to the interruptions. I'm used to needing to know right now. And it's okay, because I have this nice, pretty PowerPoint, and it's full of information that's helpful to you. But at the same time, I would like to make it as helpful to each of you as you would like. And so feel free to ask questions, ask for input, whatever it might be. Don't be afraid to raise your hands and to make this interactive. I don't have to be a talking head if you don't want me to be. Like I said, my name is Nikki Kuntz. I am the clinical director for Teen Lifeline. What that basically means is I'm in charge of a lot of things. But I have actually been with the agency for 24 years. I started out when I was in high school, actually, and now I am a licensed social worker. Who here has heard of Teen Lifeline? Let's start there. Okay, most of you. Are we on the back of your kids' IDs? Do you know?
I don't think you are.
You don't think you are? Okay, well, you guys can change that. So most of you know who we are. That's exciting. But I will talk more about who we are for the rest of you and give you a little bit of background of that and me and what we're going to talk about tonight. So I'm here to talk about teen suicide and depression as it exists in Arizona, as it exists across the nation, and what to look for in your kids, what to worry about, what to look for in your kids' friends, and then what do you do about it if you are worried? And when I say worried, I really am saying that in a more global statement, in that there's a lot of things that can create worry for us before something may have gotten to a point of where someone's thinking about suicide. And if we can deal with that earlier on, we don't have to be that far down the line. But I'm going to talk about everything up until that point, so that everyone feels a little bit more comfortable talking about a really difficult topic. So to have a clear understanding of Teen Lifeline and kind of where we come from, is that we actually started, how many of you have heard of the Netflix series 13 Reasons Why? Okay. Well, we actually got started because of a really bad made-for-TV movie as well, that happened 32 years ago, and it starred Molly Ringwald. So if you remember, in 1985, Molly Ringwald was the person, and she starred in this made-for-TV movie before cable, and it was called Surviving. It was about two teenagers who had a suicide pact, her and her boyfriend. And her boyfriend was actually played by the actor that was the lead in Gremlins, that I can't remember his first name. Yes, and that was her boyfriend. In the show, they both died by suicide from a suicide pact. They were boyfriend and girlfriend. And this show really covered how it truly affected the community as a whole, as well as these two families, and how it affected these two families very differently. And so I say it wasn't a wonderfully made movie, because it showed a lot of things that we hope that no one shows in media regarding suicide. But at the same time, teen suicide wasn't something we ever talked about at that point in time, and it's something we still struggle to talk about, and figuring out how we talk about it effectively. And back then, in 1985, when the movie came out, Arizona ranked second in the nation for the highest rate of teen suicide. Second in the nation. And so at that point in time, we realized we weren't doing what we needed to be doing to help our kids. And a local agency started doing research and started looking at where do teens go to for help. Where do your kids go to first when they have a problem? They go to their friends, right? They go to their peers. And you know what? We all did the same thing when we were in high school. It's part of development, it's part of being an adolescent, that you turn to your peers first. And so in 1985 and 1986, they started researching what's the best way to do that. And Teen Lifeline was born. We were born out of an agency back then called Phoenix South, now known as Southwest Behavioral Health. They're a very large mental health provider in Maricopa County. We were with them until about 1997, and then we spun off and became part of Teros, which is best known for substance abuse treatment, but they also are a very large behavioral health provider in the county. And then in 2000, we spun out on our own and became our own nonprofit. And so again, the core of who we are is this idea of teens typically go to their friends, to their peers, even to their peers on the internet, before they go to adults for help. So Teen Lifeline, and the idea of Teen Lifeline is just that we train teens to talk to and help other teens. What most of you probably know us for is our crisis hotline. We run a 24-hour peer counseling crisis hotline for teens, where we actually, when I say peer counseling, it means we do train teens to take calls from other teenagers across the state about any kind of problems that they're having, and talk to them and problem solve. The focus of everything that we do is increasing help-seeking behavior and building a healthy connection with a healthy adult in their life. The fact that all of you parents are sitting in this room means that typically you guys are healthy adults in their life. But unfortunately, not all parents are. So there are times that we have to help them find other healthy adults in their lives. Sometimes that's teachers and counselors and social workers. Sometimes it's their best friend's parents, which for many of you, I am sure you know your kids' friends. So we have this peer counseling hotline. We also do texting on the hotline, but we obviously can't have teenagers there in the middle of the night. So the teens are there from 3 p.m. to 9 p.m. every day. After 9 and before 3, the hotline's actually answered by adults, and they are behavioral health professionals. We have a partnership with the Crisis Response Network, which, if any of you have had any interaction in the crisis system across Maricopa County, maybe heard of something called Crisis Mobile Teams. That is something that all the schools use. That is a program run by the county and specifically through an agency called the Crisis Response Network. And our partnership is with them, so they take our after-hours calls. During the hotline time, though, between 3 and 9 every day when we have teens taking those calls and those texts, they are supervised by master's level clinicians. So one day a week, that's me, and then there's other licensed master's level social workers and counselors that supervise the hotline those other nights. So outside of that, what else do? We do education like this. We do the life skills training that our peer counselors go to and go through to take calls on the hotline. And then we also do education for students, because if teens typically turn to their friends for help, we have to also arm each of our kids with what to look for in their friends, and how they know when they're supposed to come back to us as adults and say, I'm worried about someone, I need help, they need help. And so we train teens and talk to teens about how to get help for their friends as well as for themselves. And then we also do what's called postvention. Postvention is something that no one wants to have to do. Postvention only ever refers to what happens after there's been a death by suicide in a community, in a school, in a community. And it's, we provide debriefing and crisis services to schools and communities who have lost a child to suicide. And all of our services are free. And when I talk about the hotline and I say we're open 7 days a week, it means that I do have 15 and 16-year-olds that give up their Christmas days. And they come and they talk to other kids that are struggling and having a hard time. So it's quite amazing. So when I said that we started and Teen Lifeline was second in the nation, or Arizona was second in the nation for the highest number of teen suicides, where are we now? Actually, if you look at that same age group, the adolescents, we're 20th now. But understand that it's also still the second leading cause of death for our teenagers. And specifically, it's the second leading cause of death for 10-year-olds to 35-year-olds within Arizona. So not just teens, but all the way down to 10, age 10, up to the age 35. Every odd year, our high schools and middle schools across the state, most of them, not all of them, but most of them, they all have the opportunity to participate in what's called the Youth Risk Behavior Survey. It's done by the CDC, but every state legislature decides whether or not their state's going to participate, and Arizona participates. So we send out surveys to schools that want to participate statewide, where their student body actually self-survey what's going on in their lives. Everything from I wear a helmet when I ride a bike to I wear a seatbelt when I drive in the car, all the way to issues of substance abuse, and then as well as issues of bullying, school safety, and suicide. And so some of the numbers to understand where Arizona sits with this Youth Risk Behavior Survey. So these are kids, our teens, that are self-surveying this information. Arizona has consistently, over the last, I'm going to say 7 years, ranked the highest in the amount of kids that identify as feeling sad or hopeless over the last 12 months. The reason they asked this question is because those words, sad and hopeless, and actually the full question asks that, have you felt sad and hopeless without any relief for 2 or more weeks at any point within the last 12 months? That's what the question asks. The reason that they ask that question is that those are the biggest identifiers for looking at clinical depression. The initial definition for clinical depression and criteria that has to be met is that there's things that have to be there that last 2 or more weeks without any kind of relief. And so we ask our kids the sense of feeling sad or helpless. And Arizona has consistently ranked highest in the nation over the last 7 years. 1 in 5 of our students, our high school students, have seriously considered suicide. 1 in 6 have made a plan, and 1 in 10 have made an attempt. That means 3 kids in every high school classroom have made an attempt in the last year. This is a very big problem in Arizona. It is something that's a big problem across the nation. And while I tell you this really sad news, and I know this doesn't feel good.
What do you classify as an attempt?
Intent. So this is the thing that comes to when, so what classifies an attempt is someone's intent of what they intended to do with it. So that's when it gets a little sketchy for us adults, because there's times that we look at our children and we go, wow, dramatic. This really is not this big a deal, right? But for a child who takes, when our children are little, we tell them, you can't take any more than 2 aspirin or you could die. Because we don't want them, we give them medication. We don't want them taking more just because. Yeah, when they get older though, and they don't necessarily know to read the bottle and all of that, if a child took 4 aspirin with the intent to die, that's an attempt. Because they have an intent to die, regardless of the lethality of the situation.
How long has the Lifeline number been around? How many years? And
32 years.
32. Has in the last 10 years, has the number of calls and engagement via text spiked considerably? Or?
Yes. So I'll say last year we received over 22,000 calls and texts. The year before was just under 19. Now, so we raise anywhere between 10 to 17% a year, typically, in the calls. We've only had texting for a year and a half. We launched texting the day of the murder-suicide at Independence High School. That was the day we launched. We didn't intend to launch for another few months, and we launched it that day in response. So yes, we sue. Now, what I will tell you is the number of kids in Arizona that are having thoughts of suicide at any given point, it's not changing. It's not increasing. So our kids aren't more suicidal than they were before. And that's the important thing to understand, is suicide is preventable. So it's about what we do. It's about what the support and the things and the protective factors that we put in place for our children. And what we teach them and how we help and so that we know what to look for. Now, I gave you these really sad numbers, I get that. But the other part to see is we were second in the nation 32 years ago, and we're 20th now. In those 32 years, the suicide rate of teenagers in the state of Arizona has gone down by 25%. We are moving down. But the question is why now all of a sudden, with all the media and with everything that's been going on, I am sure that you guys living in the East Valley, especially, you feel like there is something going on, because that's what you're hearing, right? And so there's a balance. There's a balance of understanding that the more we talk about it, the more we're aware of it happening. And it's not something that may have affected you before because you may not have heard about it. And your children weren't the same age. And so part of it is putting it into perspective. I cannot even begin to know what the suicide rate will be for 2017. Yes, there was a spike in suicides in certain communities within the East Valley in this last year, this last 12-month period. There has been. But at the same time, I can't compare that necessarily to the year before at this point, because all we have is the anecdotal stuff over the news. There's a lot of other stuff that goes into that. And so the year before, what I can tell you is there was a 19% increase across the state. A 19% decrease from 2015 to 2016. And not to say that there won't be, you know, I don't know what it will go from 2016 to 2017. We won't know till November. What I can tell you is that every child who dies by any means in the state, their death is reviewed. Their death is reviewed by a team of specialists depending on the type of death that they have. And there is a team of experts, actually, that are experts in suicide prevention that review the death of every suicide so that we know what do we need to do in our communities to prevent it. What is going on in certain communities to pinpoint? What I can tell you is that in the 2016 data report, so it's the report that came out last November, 95% of the deaths in Arizona, children told somebody that they were having thoughts of suicide. 95% of the children that died by suicide told someone. But you only know what you know, and you can only do something about what you know and what to look for. So that's the important thing, is that for us as a community, not just parents, as a community, it's important for us to learn what do we look for, what do we do, and how do we connect to our kids, because suicide is preventable. So what I will tell you is that to deal with the issue of suicide and mental health in general amongst our adolescents, we have to start talking to them about it. And as adults and as parents, that's incredibly scary. It's incredibly hard because you're potentially going to hear answers to questions that you really don't want to hear. And it breaks your heart. And as parents, you want to protect your child from absolutely everything horrible in the world and every horrible, hard feeling. But that's why I am telling you, in order to have this conversation with your children, you have to prepare yourself. You have to prepare yourself for listening and to stepping back. And we're going to hear from teens later in terms of what is it that they really need. And what is it that adults sometimes don't do to help them, not intentionally. It's not a fault thing. It really is. And I will talk also about what is it that our teens, when we talk to them, what is it that they're really looking for from their parents and from adults in their life? And maybe why are they so scared to come to adults with problems? So the first thing in preparing yourself is making sure that you are talking openly and honestly. Openly and honestly. What that means is without judgment. That means every time they start to say something and you want to go, but that you don't, and that you let them talk. The other thing is that you don't quickly try to fix anything. That is the hardest thing for every one of you in this room. Because your kids say, I got this problem, and you go, I got an answer. Sorry. It's okay.
At what age do we start, or do we just open our mouths?
Honestly, I will tell you, when to start those conversations with children. It's really never too early to start some of those conversations. And I'll explain that why. Okay, so it is not uncommon in the state of Arizona, across our nation, that the youngest child that dies by suicide is 10 years old. We need to be having those conversations, but I've worked with families with kids as young as 8 who have died. So, but how you have those conversations are very different. So when you have conversations with little kids, and when we know that little kids are struggling with thoughts of suicide, typically it's because it's not the reason that they're struggling with thoughts, but somewhere in their life they've had an example of suicide. Maybe they've lost someone. Maybe they have known someone else or a sibling's friend or something like that has happened, because usually there's an example. They mimic. Or the media, or things like that, or they hear us, because all of us, even adults, say things that may be insensitive, or not. It's not intentional, but we say things like, "Oh, I could just die," and little kids don't always understand that. And the more and more our media picks up on stuff, the more they are becoming more aware of things. That is the hard part with social media. social media, and we'll talk about protective factors, there's a piece of social media that has brought in protective factors to many of our kids. It has brought a sense of connection. But at the same time, our kids have access to information that we didn't have. I hated to watch the news and was forced to when I was growing up. I had to cut things out of a newspaper and bring it to class and share what was going on in the world. Where now I go to work and teenagers are coming in after school and they're like, did you hear about what happened in this place across the world? And I'm like, no, I've been at work all day. Why are you learning this? You know, they have direct access to things that we didn't. And so what that means is they are also being inundated with knowledge at an earlier age of certain things. There's good and there's bad. So how do we have that conversation at a younger age? We talk about how people get sad. We talk about what do you do when you're sad? What do you do when, that sometimes people feel so sad that they don't know what to do with it and they just want to give up. And if you ever feel that way, let's talk about what you can do if you feel that way. And it's about giving lots of options, not just one, because another tidbit of knowledge that I give to parents is that it's really important to have help your children at an earlier age to develop relationships with other healthy adults, because at times your children are going to be fearful of talking to you. Maybe because they're scared of upsetting you or angering you, but it could also just be that they're upset, that they're worried about, they don't want to worry you, they don't want to scare you, or they don't want to disappoint you. And so if you help them early on develop relationships with other people and help them to understand when you talk to those people, that you're going to have less of a problem of your children finding people you don't want them to talk to about stuff, if that makes sense. So building a healthy network, and that network can be teachers, that network can be other family members. It could be a multitude of things. For my best friends, because I'm a social worker and I work with teens, I'm that contact person for a lot of my friends' kids, because I am the person that will talk to them without judgment, and I won't tell mom or dad what we talked about unless I have to. And so we talk about that, like, when do I have to? And I always make them a part of that discussion of let's do this together. But helping them to identify multiple, because sometimes it's important. Kids are gonna be scared that they're gonna get in trouble when they tell you stuff. So give them someone else that they can talk to that can help them talk to you about that stuff. So it's really important to know that when we're talking about suicide, oftentimes we're scared to say those words to our kids, that word specifically, the word suicide. The fact is every one of your kids knows what that word means. Every one of them. It's not new to them, and it's probably touched them some way or another. When we have 1 in 5 of our kids who have thought of suicide, right? That means they're talking to each other. They know. They're struggling. Many of our kids are struggling. And so it's important to know and understand that saying that word and asking that question of, are you having thoughts of suicide? Are you having thoughts of giving up? You're not going to put the idea in your child's mind. You're not going to put that idea in anyone's mind. Because if someone is struggling to that degree, you've now just given them permission to take a load off their shoulders. Because to be in a place of having thoughts of suicide, of being in a place, and understand that suicide isn't about death. Suicide is about ending pain. It is about feeling immense emotional pain of some sort, or physical pain for many, that those feelings of feeling like it's never going to end and I don't know how to escape this, that suicide becomes an option. For someone who is having thoughts of suicide, suicide is an option as a way out. And so it's not the problem. There's a deeper problem going on. There's something else going on, and it's not just one thing. That's the hard part of what's been going on in the media and everything about the suicides that have happened in the East Valley, is that if it was just one thing, this would be so easy. But suicide is complicated because we all of us in this room, all of our kids, we all have a different level of tolerance for pain. Emotional, physical pain. We all have a different level of tolerance, and we all have a different level of protective support in our life, one way or the other, that helps us to be able to bear less or more of that pain. And so given that all of us are so very different, suicide is complicated. It's not just one problem that gets someone to that place. It's a multitude of problems. And when we see stuff on the media, oftentimes they are simplifying it to just the last problem, but not the 5 to 10 that happened before that last thing. And it's because we have a natural interest in knowing why. Why did this happen? Why did this child give up? Why did this child feel so alone? And it breaks our hearts. And we want to find the why, and we want to find the blame. The problem is that why is big, and there is no singular blame. There's really no blame. And no blame or no answer to that why is going to help us to change it.
Is it also lack of accountability because people themselves are feeling like they should be doing more than they're not doing?
What do you mean?
Like families, it's easy to blame somebody.
Yeah.
Blame is the opposite of accountability.
Right. And so the issue is it for lack of accountability, or what is this? To understand that when we are talking about suicide, this is still a taboo issue. The fact is 10 years ago, if we had done the same presentation right now, like maybe a third of you would be in this room. Okay, the fact that there's this many of you says a lot that we are able to talk more about this. But it's still a taboo subject, and it's still a taboo subject, especially when we're talking about children, because it is very easy for the outsiders to think, what did the parents not do? Who bullied them? Who didn't do this? Who didn't do that? Is it the school's fault? Is it the parents' fault? Is it their peers' fault? Whose fault is it? But at the same time, to be a parent who's lost a child, the taboo nature of, again, the stigma of looking outside is immense. And the feeling of, do people blame me for not knowing, for not seeing? But the fact is anyone who is having thoughts of suicide, they often, our teenagers' jobs as teenagers is to begin to hide things from us adults, right? They're trying to gain their independence. They're trying to figure out who they are. They start to keep secrets from us adults, right? And so they're good at it. They're good at it when they're not having problems, okay? And so to understand that when it comes to suicide, we can always go back and look at a story and go, oh, look at that warning sign. Look at that warning sign, warning sign. But at the same time, when you're in the middle of it, in the middle of life, you can explain lots of things away. We all have bad days. We all have, hindsight is great, but it's hindsight. It's just that.
You mentioned when they ask kids, they come across saying it's sadness, it's the sadness. And I'm curious, in your experience, because in my mind, the definition of friendship has changed so drastically.
Yes.
And social media friendships are a norm versus real, what I would call true friendships,
right,
where you engage and sit and talk. And is that part of it because they don't understand what true friendship is, and that they just accept friendship in social media as a true friendship? I mean, because I struggle with that, because like I see kids not sharing information, but they say they have these good friends, but all they're doing is texting each other, and they actually never spend any time with each other
Right.
and really truly engage. Is that where
Right.
that sadness comes from, or is that just speculation?
So really the question has to do with the idea of friendship and how much it's changed, and whether or not the sadness that our kids are feeling, is it coming from a sense of being really not connected at the core. And so what this really kind of comes down to is this idea of perception and perceived relationships and perceived connections with individuals. That actually hasn't changed. Now the fact is they have people from across the world that now they have these perceived relationships with. But the issue of having perceived connections with individuals has always existed with teenagers. It's part of adolescence. It's part of brain development. And that's the part where it's important for us when it says up here to validate and support their feelings, follow their cues, is this idea of, how many of you have seen your child in crisis and gone, this is not a crisis? And that is the perception issue. And so that's the thing, is that we have to follow their cues of really what matters when they are feeling these feelings. The reality of what you see as reality really isn't important. And if you try to give that to them and force that on them, they feel disconnected from you. So it's about recognizing you feel this. You feel this. But what I will tell you is that one time I was doing postvention at a school after a child died. And I was running a debriefing group. And it was a group, most of the kids in the group were very close friends with the individual who died. But one of the people was not. It was a little girl. And they were like, why are you here? You didn't even know her. And she goes, no, every day she sat in front of me in class, and when she walked in, she said hi to me. And she always asked how my day was. And I thought her hair was beautiful. And I would just sit behind her and thought she was the nicest person. And I'm so sad that I'm not gonna see her. And it was understanding that. There was a perceived connection. It doesn't mean it necessarily existed. It just has to matter to your kid. And so when we talk about crisis, giving them perspective will come, but if you try to give that to them immediately, they will shut down. Because they need you to validate it feels bad to them. How many of you have had a broken heart? How many of you, when you had your very first heartbreak, you thought it was never gonna heal? It was never gonna get better. Exactly, okay? So remember that, because that's what our kids feel when their friend doesn't say hello to them, when their friend ignores them and ostracizes them when they didn't before, or when there is a breakup and a broken heart. Those feelings, they existed even for us. And so it's important to kind of dig back into that and go, yeah, I kind of remember that. And just when you want to speak and they're talking, take a step back and let them go and go, I get it. It hurts. It's sometimes the best thing you can ever say to a kid is, this hurts and this sucks and I get it. And then they're just like, yeah, yeah, thank you for not telling me to feel better. Or as my mother used to say, just go wash your face, you'll feel better. No, that doesn't help. It doesn't make you feel better. Now you just have a wet face. Like, it's not. Mm-hmm.
What if you have teens that are very short-tempered, and they use, I should just kill myself, or I don't want to be alive anymore. It's like, usually it's in the heat of the moment, something's going on, and it's like, like I was telling my husband, it's just like you never know if
if it's real or not.
It's gonna be,
Right.
real. It's like, how seriously do you take it versus,
Right.
they're just blowing off steam because she's, angry again.
Right. So I would tell you, as a clinician, anytime those words are said, I take them just as serious as the next. So the real question is whether or not when a child appears to just be really frustrated or angry and says, oh, I just want to kill myself. And you don't know really, do they mean it, or are they just kind of blown off steam. This kind of goes back to the old adage that I have dealt with for decades in this field, is that this idea of that kids do certain things like threaten suicide for attention and attention seeking. What I will tell you as a clinician, as someone who works with adolescents and works in this field, is if anyone feels that they have to say those words to get attention, we need to be giving it to them. Because if they don't get it, the next step is very scary, because they will keep pushing to get what they're looking for. Now, how this plays out is those words come out of anyone's mouth, it's serious. So if that's how you're feeling, then let's deal with that. Let's deal with that. Sit and talk to me. You're feeling suicidal? You're feeling? So then it's a matter of, okay, so do we need to get you help? Do we need to take you for an evaluation? Because those words we take serious. Now, if you're saying you're frustrated, you're angry, you're mad at me, whatever, okay. But let's deal with that. But when you say those words, everything goes on hold, because we just deal with that. We're just dealing with that. And that scares me, because I'm your mom and I love you, and if you're feeling that desperate, we need to deal with this. So let's figure out what are the next steps to do that. Now, if you are frustrated and you're angry and you're saying those things, then we have to stop saying these other things. Because if you're feeling this way, I want you to tell me. And I love you, and I'm gonna do everything I can to help you and to get you what you need to not feel that way. But if that's not what you're feeling and you're feeling this way, then let's deal with that separately. Understand that a lot of people will talk about the impulsivity of teen suicide. Teen suicide is rarely impulsive. The immediate act of an attempt or even a death might appear to be impulsive because something stressful happened right then, but it was something that there were things happening before that. But the issue is that teens are impulsive. And so it could just be, we've recently added a new warning sign to the list of warning signs, and we'll talk about it in just a second. But one of that is that fear of humiliation, or that instant fear of not being able, of kind of this like internal agitation of I can't feel better. Now, one of the questions earlier was about kids these days, is social media or certain things playing into it. The fact is our kids live in a world of immediate gratification. Everything from Google instead of a library to Amazon in 2 hours, okay? They do not have to go to the record store the way that I did, okay? They get all of their stuff immediate. So what that also means is our kids don't know how to deal with emotions immediately. And puberty is happening younger and younger. And so we have kids that are growing up with hormones and these other bodily changes, but yet their brain development isn't getting faster. So they don't necessarily have the cognitive skills of coping and self-soothing and all of these other things that are matching what's happening hormonally and stuff. And so when we live in a world of immediate gratification, that also means that they don't know emotion regulation. Uncomfortable feelings need to go right away. How do I get rid of this right away? And so it's about emotion regulation. It's about teaching them that, teaching language vocabulary That's another thing, making sure that our kids know how to express our feelings. And that there is a difference between feelings and behaviors. And so it's about us making sure that we're validating the feelings of our children. That we are saying, it's okay to be angry. It's not okay to punch someone. It's okay to be mad at me. And there's plenty of times that I make kids mad because sometimes I have to do things they don't like tell parents things. And I say, I get it, you're angry. That's okay. It's okay. You can be angry with me. And as their parents, it's okay for them to be angry with you. You'll love them tomorrow, just the same as you do today. Mm-hmm.
When you talk about how they aren't equipped to handle some of these emotions, I keep giving my son the same advice that I'm so worried is wrong. And that is, he's so desirous to tell his friends and have them connect with him in that way. I tell him there are adults that aren't equipped to know how to deal with this correctly. And so their rejection or their standoffishness or their uncomfortability is going to come through, and the exact thing that you want is actually going to make you feel more disconnected. Mm-hmm. Is that accurate?
So the question is really if our kids aren't equipped to deal with some of these emotions when they talk to each other, are we setting them up to be rejected, potentially? And so in your question, is your son trying to communicate his emotions and feelings to other kids? And are they rejecting him? Or are they?
It's a mixed bag.
It's a mixed bag.
And
it is. It's a mixed bag in the world.
The thing about it is like the idea that he was able to talk with someone on text. The next day when they showed up, he acted like the conversation never happened, which I kind of wanted to illustrate. He may have felt at least comfortable with that, but he needs to concentrate on the rest of his life.
Right.
Later on, that he's not going to come to you, and that he takes it as a personal.
He takes it personally.
Yeah.
Right. And so that is also about education about human behavior. Is about maybe it was, he wanted to keep it confidential. You guys had a conversation just between the two of you. But also that we all do have our own lives. And we all have things, and just because someone says, I'm always there for you, they do have to sleep and eat and spend time with their families and do homework and stuff. And so it's about helping him to learn expectations, appropriate expectations for human behavior.
That's the exact word I used.
It's expectations, and it's that they're feasible. So what you do see up here is that, how many of you think that your kid has mood swings, is lazy, has a poor attitude, and is immature? Okay, so that's a definition of teenagers, right? But honestly, these often get misinterpreted as just being teenagers, when actually many of these, to some degree, and to varying degrees, depending on how much a child has, can actually be mental health symptoms. So when we talk about depression just being that kid who sat in the corner, no, there's lots of kids who have depression that act out and become more hyperactive. Big proponent for schools not having no tolerance policies. Reason why is because a kid's never been in trouble and now all of a sudden they are. We need to ask some questions. Because if it's not normal behavior for them, there could be something else going on. For adolescents, their brains are still growing. Brains don't stop developing till 25. Okay, so they still have some time to be cooking in there. And so it's important to understand that teens at risk, not just for suicide, but for mental health issues, they don't show what the TV shows them as, or what we stereotypically think of it as, but instead they show up as drastic changes in your child. Drastic changes. You know your children. Drastic changes in them. And it might not be just at home, because they hide stuff, because kids are sneaky, it could be that their behavior changes at school drastically, with their friends drastically. It's that it's time to ask questions. So quickly, just to kind of go over some
say that my kid has exhibited a lot more dramatic changes, but she did announce quite deliberately that she wanted to see a counselor. She'd seen a therapist since she was 5, off and on. And so when she said this, I made an appointment. And she went to the first appointment, came back, had a good experience, liked the therapist. The next appointment came up and she missed it, bailed. And then the next appointment came up and it was inconvenient, but I made her go. And then she said, I don't want to go anymore. So, you know, I don't feel that that one time going to a therapist could have fixed everything that was stressing her out.
No.
But should I have, I canceled the,
Right.
Should I have continued to make her go? Or
So-
is that not helpful? Because it didn't seem helpful to force her to go.
So in dealing with the issue of counseling and children, it is really common for teenagers especially to, one, either say I don't want to go and their parents are forcing them, or for them to say I want to go and then, oh, I just don't like this one, or I just don't like this. So I always talk to parents and teens about one thing, that there has to be buy-in from both sides for one thing. Parents, it's unrealistic to think that all therapists can help your kid because you don't like every person you meet. They don't necessarily like every person they meet. And just because someone likes to work with teenagers doesn't mean teenagers like them. So that is one thing. But at the same time, let's break down what the first 3 visits of therapy look like. The first one, it's intake. Fairly surface level, we start talking about stuff, but not at a deeper level. And me, as the person who's going in for therapy, I am an expert. I'm an expert at my life, and I'm giving you my best self. Second one, this is where things start getting tough, because the second visit is about me spilling everything. And they're not going to really offer much yet, because they're still learning from me. And they're still learning my story and my narrative. And I feel horrible, typically, when I leave that therapy session, because I have just given everything, my emotional self, out there. And you just feel exhausted and broken. The third one, they start talking and helping and navigating us through life. So things don't start really happening till the third visit, because the first 2 are just about getting to know each other. So I always say, you have to promise me 3. You have to promise me 3. At 3, we will decide whether or not you just don't have a connection with the person and we find another one. But everyone deserves the right to have someone who's just there for them in life. And that's what a therapist or a counselor is. It is someone who just gets to be on your side, doesn't have their own investment in it. They're just there for you. So it's about getting that agreement of, I agree to listen if you're not feeling connected, if you're feeling something, but I need you to promise me 3. And then if you're not, we'll find someone else and we'll sit down and we'll problem solve this together and figure out what is it that you feel like maybe you don't need, and I'm here to help with that. But our kids at adolescence are starting to get to a place where we have to start doing problem solving with them. Even if we know what that end answer is going to be because we're going to make it be that, we have to lead them through that process of, let's figure this out together. So what are my boundaries, what are my expectations, and what are yours? What do we do together? Because our kids are going to go off to college or they're going to graduate, and then they have to navigate this world. And so if we do this together, but with clear expectations, as a mom, I got expectations. But can you compromise with me and say, and I'll listen if you can also do this? And make her more part of that process and stuff. The other thing to know is that sometimes treatment is as much as suicide and things are talked about in our world now, and even our community especially, it doesn't mean that there isn't stigma associated with getting counseling and getting help, because they don't want to be broken. So that's the trick, is that none of us are broken. I don't care how healthy you are, we could all benefit from a therapist. If nothing else, just someone to be our biggest cheerleader and not to have any investment in our decisions. Someone that we can tell those horrible thoughts that we have and they don't care and they won't hate us. We all deserve that. So it's about making sure that we're having those conversations with our kids of, there's nothing broken. Just, you don't have to be mentally ill and have mental illness to get to have a counselor. It's your personal best friend.
What if the child is absolutely flat out refusing to go, but you feel like
They need to? Then at some point it is, the question is whether or not if your child just absolutely refuses, that they won't participate in this, it won't participate in getting help. At some point, if you know that something's going on, you have minimal amount of time with your kid in high school till they hit 18. And in 18, you have you can't force anything. So it is about making sure that in that time frame, that if you need to force it, then that's what happens. Then you force it. But try to make that, first try to have that conversation. So I'm going to quickly go through some stuff, just real quick. Okay, so risk factors, everyone hears about these risk factors and warning signs. Risk factors are things that endure over time. They're things that create trauma or pain for us over time. We all have some of them. But they're not really in our control. They're things that happen to us in life. They are loss. They are biological factors, physical illness, past history of trauma or losing people to suicide, current life events that are happening around us, but also very often untreated, undiagnosed, or ineffectively treated mental health issues. Puts us, any of us, at higher risk to feel like there's nothing out there and we feel like giving up. But warning signs are the things that we need to most pay attention to, because warning signs are immediate. They are immediate risk. Anyone who makes statements of saying they want to kill themselves, they have no reason to live, they're a burden. And a burden is a big one, especially for teenagers. When we wonder why our kids don't tell us things, it's because most often on the hotline what we hear is, I don't want to hurt them. They would be better off without me, because all I do is cause them stress and pain. And while that is definitely not a parental's view, and they know that you would do anything and everything to help them, it's still this feeling of where they feel like they have to protect you from them. Behavioral signs, and this is when I was talking about the real need to understand and look at big changes that may happen or drastic changes that happen in your child's behavior. But understand these warning signs exist for everyone. So if it's your best friend or your sibling and there's a drastic change and it looks like this, warning signs are the same regardless of age. They may look a little different in teenagers, but it's only mostly because of emotional and kind of emotional reaction to things. So you'll see the normal ones of withdrawal and isolation, but also this acting recklessly all of a sudden, giving things away, increased aggressive behavior out of nowhere for no reason, especially. And then also important to often, especially if you think your kid's struggling, is to take a look at their internet searches, because there is a wealth of information on the internet that shouldn't be there. Mood changes, depression, loss of interest, rage, irritability, humiliation, so fear of humiliation, and intense anxiety. And that's when we're talking about when our kids are seeing that there is a crisis that we're like, what is this going on? Because this is not the reaction that I feel like you should have to this situation. High anxiety and almost fear is a huge warning sign. So protective factors. These are the things that I've mentioned off and on that we can do early on and even now to arm our children against the risk factors and the early warning signs. Positive relationships. So when you're talking about trying to point your kid about not getting support from their peers, really, I think of what is most helpful for people is creating a network of support under any one of us. So it's about helping your child to find the people they can trust, both adults, those on campus, those off campus, their friends, anyone and everyone that they can trust to get that support, the more that you don't have to hold it alone as a parent. The more we create a safety network, including their teachers and their social workers and the counselors. A sense of safety in their community and their schools is a huge protective factor. And understand that this is a huge topic right now, given what happened in Florida, but also given what's happening in this community and the media attention to suicide. That our children, many of our children, don't feel safe because of a multitude of issues happening. And so it is about having conversations of safety as well. Academic and extracurricular stress and success. So these are the kids especially that have high expectations of themselves, sometimes way too high of expectations. And sometimes they think us as parents have them, but really they have higher expectations than we do of them. And it's about helping them, but it's about helping them to see the realistic nature of those, but making sure that knowing that academic and extracurricular success is a huge protective factor. So sports or extracurricular stuff. I was a video game kid. Like the fact I was good at them and had found friends that thought I was good at them was a protective factor for me. And access to resources. What this means is access to therapy, access to social workers at school, access to Teen Lifeline. That is why the ID initiative exists, actually, is specifically for this protective factor, for us to have the ID, our number on the back of IDs. I will tell you, more lives have been saved by that sticker and that number on the back of it, not because they called us, but because the school did it and a kid came forward.
Do you have those stickers with you?
I don't, but I could have them to the school tomorrow. Like it's one of those that we keep them in-house. But know that just for a school to say, we want you to know that you're never alone, is enough for some students to come forward and say, I need to talk. And sometimes that's not to us, and that's okay, because that's not the point of the stickers, is so that kids don't feel alone, whether or not they're at school or not. And so how do you build that resiliency? Keeping that open communication. Being a partner with your kid when it comes to problem solving, even when you want to fix it for them. Even when you want to do it. And even as an adult who does this every day, I still want to fix it for them. Because I go, why are you making your life so difficult? But it's about stepping back and going, let's figure this out together. That's even important in bullying. In bullying prevention, if your child is being bullied or having a tough time in relationships, it's about sitting down with them and saying, what is it that you want to have happen? What role do you want me to have in it? And as a parent, I need you to know that if this is the line that I will get involved at. But if you're not ready for me to have that yet, that's okay. Let's figure out what you're going to do. What I can help you with. Maybe even figure out what you can say. But helping them to practice that. It's okay if they problem solve a situation and their end option doesn't work out. It's okay, that happens to all of us. It's about coming back to the drawing board and go, okay, so let's work on this again. Let's do this again. But it's about not taking that control away from them. Allowing them to use this experience as a way to work together. Make sure that we are creating a safe and supportive environment, that we are helping to foster healthy relationships with lots of people in their life, even other adults. But also, be a good role model. If you want your kids to act and behave on social media, then be nice on social media. Because I know lots of adults who don't, who aren't very nice on social media. If you are struggling, reach out for help. Because it models to our children that we don't deserve it if we don't, okay? Or that they feel like they should be stronger because we're not doing it. And that's not it at all. Model good behavior and what we want from our children. So why do kids not reach out? I've pretty much covered all of this through some point or another. But these are all the reasons why. They're embarrassed, or they don't think that you'll understand. They see you not seek help when you're struggling in a moment or with something. And so they think that it's weak of them to ask for help. They are scared of what treatment and help looks like. They don't want to go to a hospital. They don't want to be sick. In their mind and in the media, that's what it says. But also, many of them maybe have gone to adults and have been disappointed. Maybe it's not you, maybe it's someone else. But it's about telling our kids that the first person you go to, if they don't react the way that you need them to, then you go to the next one. You don't stop until you find that person that's willing to listen and to help. And I already did this, but just a reminder, don't try to fix it for them. Problem solve with them, but it's okay to pull a hard line if it gets to the point where you're like, no, I need to get you help. I need to do X, Y, and Z. But allow them to be a part of the process. Don't be afraid to ask them the direct question of if you've ever had thoughts of suicide. Don't minimize it. Make sure that you're validating it. And make sure that you're taking it serious and don't wait to act. The one thing I can tell you from the hotline, the biggest complaint that I get from kids that are struggling with suicide that have told their families is they say, well, my mom said she was going to get me a counselor, but I haven't heard anything since. And yes, there's waiting lists. There are a lot of really long waiting lists for therapy. I get it. I know it. There's a lot of ways to try to get around that and to kind of hold off until you can get to it. But the one thing I can tell you is that if you've told your child that you're going to get them help, communicate with them that what you've done. So if you say there's a month-long waiting list, tell them there's a month-long waiting list. So let's figure out when you're struggling and when you're having a hard time in between then and now, what we can do. What are you going to do? But to not tell them makes them often feel like we're not doing anything and that we just didn't believe them and we're just sitting on it.
Is it fair to, perception is that coping skills have been diminished as far as being taught to our children over time. Is that a fair statement?
It's self-soothing. No, it's just that they don't necessarily know how to use them appropriately.
Is that what it is?
Yeah. It's more that they don't know what it's really called. They have them. Many of them have them. They're the things that make them happy. They're the things that they do. They don't necessarily know to utilize them that way. Yeah. So it's about teaching them that. But it's about helping them practice because things don't always come easy. I do a lot of deep breathing with kids when I do education in the classrooms, and they love it. But we talk about meditation takes practice. Best teacher I ever had in high school, we meditated every day, first 5 minutes of every class. It was awesome. But it's about learning and practicing and even being goofy with it and being like, try this out with me. Let's see how fun this is. Uh-huh.
How long do you need to wait after you, like, if your kids go to counseling, a couple of times, like, they don't change, like it's a slow process. So
yes.
As a parent, what's your expectation should be and how long do you want to give this process a chance before you start intervening and saying, how are you feeling now?
You can always ask your child.
And
yeah, you can always ask your child, how are you feeling? Not with the expectation of are you all better? But also don't be afraid to have a conversation with their therapist.
If they say, okay, I'm feeling better, but you don't see change in attitude or on those signs, what do you do?
Have a conversation with their counselor. Now understand, a good counselor isn't going to tell you everything they talked about. But they can say, okay, let's work on that. Maybe I'll bring that up. Or they could, or you can also say, can you give me some help in how do I communicate with her or him when they come home? Because they say they feel better, but I'm not seeing a change necessarily in our relationship or how they're reacting to me. But be a part of that team. Don't be afraid to talk to the therapist and the counselor. Don't be afraid. But no, they're not going to tell you everything, the ins and outs of everything. They're not. So one last thing is make sure that you stay calm. And then if your child tells you that they are in fact having thoughts of suicide, if you ask them that question and they say yes, or I have in the past, tell them thank you and tell them you are so brave to tell me that. Because those are the hardest words that you can ever admit to anyone, much less your parents. Because they know that you love them unconditional. Do what you can to reassure them that not necessarily that things are going to get all better, but that you are going to do everything you can to be next to them and get them the help that they need. Make sure that you do contact a mental health person for evaluation. Reduce any immediate stressors. It is okay. It is not the end of the world if they don't take a test tomorrow, okay, and they stay home from school. It's someone's with them, okay? There's lots of things that aren't the end of the world. Take away the immediate stress, but not in a way that they're going to think that this is all I have to say to get away from it. But just pay attention to those moments that you can look at your kid and go, wow, 10 years from now, this is not going to matter. This test, this paper, not going to matter, okay? Let's be realistic. But then lastly, make sure that you're securing any lethal means in your house. A quick thing about lethal means is if you have guns in your house, it's yours, whatever. If you have a lock or if you have a safe, make sure that you are changing the placement of that key and the combination of that code often, no matter what, even if your child isn't struggling. The reason I say that is kids are sneaky and they know things and they pay attention and they watch when you think they're not. And so the amount of times that I have to tell parents, your child has the combination to your safe, your gun safe, and they say, no, they don't. Oh, no, they do. They've already told me. You need to change it. Change it often, change the placement of the keys. If your child is having thoughts of suicide and if they're struggling, please lock up your weapons. Please either get them out of the house or lock them up and get them safe. Because it's all about taking away the lethal means and creating safety for the immediate time. Understand, Teen Lifeline is not just there for kids, it's also for parents. So if you also are worried about your child or you don't know what to do or you need a referral or a place to go or what next steps are, just call us and we'll help you out. Again, 24/7. There is information here with all the warning signs and risk factors and how to talk to your kids. Over there on the piano, there's also magnets for your refrigerators and hotline cards if you want them. There we go.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.